Colin Blunstone. How's it going?
Going great, Chris. Great to see you.
Great. So, of course, you're lead singer of the Zombies. It's been happening for a long time. Can you tell us how it all started with the Zombies? How did the band get together?
Well, we all went to school in a place called St Albans in Hertfordshire. I'm not saying we all lived there, but that's where we went to school, and that was the basis of it, really. Rod Argent originally had the idea of forming a band, having seen his cousin Jim Rodford play in a local band, and his cousin Jim Rodford went on to play for 20 years in the Kinks before he joined a later version of the Zombies. But Rod got this idea of forming a band, and he just went around asking the best players he knew locally if they wanted to be in a band. And eventually, I was invited to play in a rather roundabout way. Just someone in my class at school knew Rod Argent, and they just said to me, "You've got a guitar, haven't you?" I always think of this as my way into the band was someone just said, "You've got a guitar, haven't you?" And I said, "Yes." And I was in. That was it. It was quite simple to get into the band in those days. And I joined as a rhythm guitarist. And we just built up a local following. And then eventually we got an opportunity to make a record, which was She's Not There, and was a number one hit record all around the world. So it was a bit dreamlike, to be honest. We just started off in a very low key way as a school band, and ended up having a number one hit record in America 3 or 4 years later. And then, of course, the Zombies have kept together one way and another over the years, but certainly we've been playing constantly from 1999 until last year, when sadly Rod was very ill and he's decided not to tour anymore. So there won't be any more Zombies tours, quite possibly some Zombies recordings. We've got to investigate that and see how that works out. But I've just tried to reactivate my solo career. I've kept it ticking over on a fairly low a low bass, just in the background while the Zombies were being featured. And so now with my solo band, there's recording a new album. We're going to the States in about in a month's time, and then we're going to tour through May, the whole of the UK with the solo band.
Yeah, it's the I Believe in Miracles tour, isn't it?
It is, yes. I didn't come up with that name, but it's quite appropriate, really. It is a bit of a miracle to be had 60 years in the music business and still be touring.
Great. And can you tell us about your song Time of the Season? Do you remember when you first recorded it? It's a very popular song of yours.
I do remember it very well. We recorded it in 1967. It was the last track we recorded for an album called Odyssey and Oracle. Um, it was a huge hit in America. Again, in Cashbox, it went to number one in Billboard, two or three or something like that. It was never actually a hit in the UK. And a lot of people don't realize that because it's been in so many films and so many commercials. It's a really well-known track, but it's never been a hit in this country. It's been a hit in just about every country around the world except here, which is, it's strange, but it happens like that. In different countries, you have different hits. Um, and Time of the Season never made it into the charts here, but it was the last track that was recorded for Odyssey and Oracle. It was written and finished in the morning before we recorded it. And I remember I had a real struggle on the lead vocal while I was recording it because I didn't really know it very well. And that's what I remember about it. Rod and I getting quite aggressive with one another because time was running out. We had to finish this song, and we ended up shouting at one another quite vigorously. And it always made me laugh because I'm singing, "It's the time of the season for loving." And at the same time, Rod and I are going at one another, hammer and tongs, about this song and how I should be phrasing it. And should I be singing on the beat, or should I be trying to get ahead of the beat? And what was going on in the studio bears no relationship to the lyric in this song. But once it was finished, we just managed to record it before we ran out of recording budget. Um, and an hour after we'd recorded it, we were all down the pub having a laugh about it all. But it did get fairly frantic while we were actually recording. Studio 3, Abbey Road. It was an afternoon session. I remember it vividly.
And can that sometimes bring the best out of you? Of course, it's very different now in the recording studio, but when you've got a certain amount of time, or is it the opposite? I suppose it depends on the song and how it's going, really.
Actually, it can bring out the best of you because there's an energy in the studio that wouldn't be there if you had a bottomless budget and you could record forever. People can get a bit lethargic, but when you know you've got to record quickly, there's definitely an energy in the studio, I can assure you. And that was true of that whole album, Odyssey and Oracle. We'd been given £1,000 by CBS. And even in those days, that was not a lot of money to record an album, particularly not in Abbey Road, which is notoriously expensive. It's a wonderful studio, but it's very expensive to record there. And so we were watching the clock the whole time we were recording, and we had to record that album very, very fast.
You do find with records and recordings of that era, they have a different sound to them, I think, because it's very much a live performance, wasn't it? You had to get everything right together on the
It
day.
is, it is practically a live performance. The band recorded live. They were on different tracks, but they were recording live. And then I would usually go in and record the lead vocal with the backing vocals. And again, most of those tracks, as far as I can remember, it's all one take. And you do hear of people who, could record tracks just one little bit at a time, and then it's tuned and harmonized and goodness knows what else.
So you was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2019. What did that feel like?
Absolutely incredible. It was in Brooklyn, in New York. There's 18,000 people there. It's a huge arena that we got inducted in, along with Janet Jackson and Stevie Nicks, Radiohead, Roxy Music, The Cure, Def Leppard. I think that's it. It's a wonderful show. Not everyone played live, but most people played live that night, and it's a night I'll never forget. It's a really emotional, dramatic evening, and in a way, it's a kind of recognition that your work has been noticed by the industry in particular, and appreciated. And so, in some ways, perhaps it validates to some extent what you've been writing and recording over the years. It was a wonderful, celebration of, I think it's 7 artists who have been recording for some time. To be inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you've had to have been making records for, I think it's 20 years, or it could be 25 years. So it's not for bands that are just starting out. There are other organisations that would reward bands that are just starting out, but this is for bands who have got a bit of a history, and it felt really wonderful. It felt like a celebration.
Great. And who were some of your idols when you were growing up, when you were just first getting into music?
Well, at the very beginning, it would have been Elvis, Chuck Berry, and Little Richard. A little bit later on, Buddy Holly, Ricky Nelson, and then by then I was starting to get into perhaps more of the blues artists and rhythm and blues artists. And in 1963, the Beatles happened, and I think all of the Zombies were hugely affected by the Beatles. They just changed everything. And we actually, before we started recording, as a local band, we actually played a lot of Beatles songs. So they were fantastic songs. Once we had a hit record, you can't really be doing covers of Beatles songs. But until then, we did do quite a few Beatles songs. So they were my main influences, I think. Elvis, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, a lot of the blues greats, rhythm and blues, and then the Beatles had a huge effect on us.
And what was that era like growing up in? Because you hear a lot about it, and it's always nice to hear stories.
Yeah, it was very exciting. The world was changing in a big way, and it seemed as though the arts of the world was centered in and around London. It was a time when it felt like anything was possible. And for us, it kind of was, because we went from being an amateur local band, almost it seems overnight, to having a hit record and traveling around the world. What could be a better way to live, and traveling around the world playing the music you love with your pals, people you've grown up with. It was a wonderful experience for us. But there was electricity in the country at that time, just because everyone looked to London for design, photography, the theatre, film, particularly music. Everyone, Mary Grant, David Bailey, John Osborne, Michael Caine, all these people who were just world stars. And it encouraged people all around the world to look to London and the UK for their lead.
And did the zombies get found as such back then, or how did it happen?
Um, if you ask the five zombies, we'd all probably give you a slightly different answer. But as the other four aren't here, we won a big rock and roll competition, and that led to getting a contract with Decca Records. And during our first session with Decca Records, we played a Rod Argent song called She's Not There. I had no idea Rod could write songs. That was a huge surprise to me when he said, I've written this song, and it was She's Not There. And that changed everything. It was a huge hit all around the world. Funnily enough, it was on a program on TV called Jukebox Jury that used to be on Saturday nights at about 6 o'clock. And at the time, there was only one or two stations. So the whole country is watching Jukebox Jury, particularly because George Harrison was on the jury that used to say whether a record was going to be a hit or not. And they played the Zombies, She's Not There. And George Harrison said he really liked it and he thought it would be a hit. And I mean, it was stunning for us we were watching on TV, and to see George Harrison of the Beatles say he liked our song. And as soon as he said that, of course, it was a huge hit as well. So that's what happened with us. That's how we started as a professional band.
Yeah, and the album Begin Here by the Zombies is going to be remastered and released on the 17th of April. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it was our first album. I think She's Not There probably took Decca Records a little bit by surprise when it was a hit. And as soon as it was a hit, the pressure was on for us to record an album. And we were touring at the time. So we had to record it very quickly, a little bit like Odyssey and Oracle, but for a different reason. With Odyssey and Oracle, there were money constraints, but with Begin Here, there were time constraints. So we had to record it very, very quickly. And of course, Rod and Chris White had only just discovered that they could write songs. So they didn't have a backlog of songs that we could use. So it was challenging to find the material and get it recorded as quickly as possible. And when it first came out, none of the hit singles were included on Begin Here. It was traditional in this country that you didn't put hit singles on it. That way people would buy the hit singles and they would buy the album separately. Now, of course, people put the hit singles on the album. And with this reissue, the hit singles will be on the album. They weren't on the original album. But it'll be interesting to see what people make of this. It was our first adventure in a commercial, sophisticated studio. And there were time constraints, so we had to really get on with it. And we'll see what people make of it now it's being re-released.
Great. And what can you tell us about your solo stuff, material that you're working on?
I'm recording with a producer called George Moore. I've got writing credits on 7 of the 8 tracks that we've finished so far. We know what the other 2 songs are going to be, so we've mapped out what the material is, and I would hope that it will be finished, hopefully by the autumn, certainly by the end of the year. So I'm really excited about that. I haven't had a solo album out for some time, and I'm sure it will certainly be released next year. It's great fun working with all new musicians in a new studio with a new producer, all lovely people and very, very supportive, and making this album just great fun to be in the studio with them.
And is it all new songs or are there some covers on there or?
It's a real mixture. There is one cover on there, but it's a cover of another writer, but it's never been released. So I didn't write it, but it will be a new song to the listening public. Of my songs, One or two of them, I've recorded them in completely different versions. Because what I did, I gave George Moore, my producer, a big stack of demos of songs that I'd written. And I just went with the songs that he chose. And one or two of them, I've recorded perhaps, one I'm thinking of, I've recorded with a string quartet. But we're not using a string quartet, we're using a more traditional band. And so it's quite different. But most of the songs people will have never heard, the original material previously unrecorded.
Great. And so your solo tour coming up is the I Believe in Miracles tour, or Believe in Miracles tour, rather, from the 8th through to the 28th of May. How much are you looking forward to it, and what can your fans expect?
Well, I'm really looking forward to it. I've got a wonderful solo band, all great players and great people to be traveling with as well, lovely blokes. So I'm really looking forward to a month on the road with the solo band. And we'll be playing a selection of songs from my 60-year career. So right from the very earliest sessions with in Decca Studios, we'll play some songs from then, right up to, I hope to include maybe a couple of tracks from my as yet unreleased album, yet to be discussed. We'll have to see when we get into rehearsals about that. But there'll be Zombies classics, solo classics, a little bit of Alan Parsons, and hopefully something for everyone, uh, taken from my career from '64 up until now.
And how do you narrow that down? Because there must be many songs to choose from.
I know it is. It's quite difficult, really. I like to try and record. I like to try and play in concert a few new songs, but I'm aware that some people in the audience will want to hear the old tracks and songs that they're familiar with. So it is. It's quite a delicate process to put the set together. But hopefully, we've got some original Zombies from way back when. We've got some newer Zombies tracks. We've got original stuff from me and newer stuff from me, and then some tracks that I've done with other people, for instance, with the Alan Parsons project. So I like to think there's something there for everyone.
And back to Time of the Season, what do you think it is about that song? Is it a vibe? Is it, what would you put your finger on it that people love about it even today? People love it after all these years.
It is interesting, isn't it? I think it was wonderfully, it's a great song and it was performed very well by the band. I think it was recorded very well as well. The engineers at Abbey Road were just second to anybody, they second to no one. I mean, they were just at the cutting edge of the industry at that time. I think there's a contradiction in Time of the Season in that in some ways it sounds of its time and it's used a lot in any film or commercial that might be reflecting on the 60s. They'll use Time of the Season, but at the same time it's got a sort of a timeless feel about it as well. It's a real contradiction. It sounds quite of the moment, really. I know people all around the world love that song, and I always play it when I perform as a solo artist. I always play Time of the Season and She's Not There. And after all these years, they still sound fresh to me when we perform them. They're just wonderful classic songs.
And what do you think is the best song you've recorded? It might be a different song. It's
I've
a hard
recorded
question.
I've recorded a lot of songs over the years. I mean, when people ask me for a favorite song, I'll often go back to She's Not There because it changed our lives forever. We went from being a local band in St. Albans to being a band that traveled internationally and played in arenas. And it's because of that song. So it's certainly one of my favorite songs.
So with the Zombies, I imagine that you started off, you would gig locally at pubs and different venues like that. Was that the case?
Absolutely, yeah. We would play anywhere that would have us. And we didn't ask for a lot of money either. We just enjoyed playing. And I think to start with, we used to travel to the gigs on the bus. How on earth we did that with all the gear. And then I remember as things progressed, our drummer, Hugh Grundy, who lived close to me, he got a scooter, a Lambretta. And somehow he and I used to go on this Lambretta with his drums and my guitar. And that's how we travelled to and from
Wow.
gigs. That was when we were in the big time. So yeah, we we just play anywhere we possibly could, and then we won a big rock and roll competition, um, and that led to a contract with Decca. We and in that first session, Rod Argent and Chris White, two members of the Zombies, came up with two wonderful songs. Rod wrote "She's Not There," and Chris White wrote the B-side, which is called "You Make Me Feel Good." "She's Not There" went on to be a huge hit. And suddenly we'd gone from being a local amateur band into being a professional international band, I suppose you would call it. And it was that part of our career was a little bit like an overnight sensation, if you like. But we put a lot of work in the years before it, as happens with nearly everyone. It feels like an overnight thing, but most people have put in years beforehand before
Yeah,
they
there's a
get.
lot of hard graft, isn't there, behind it all?
Yeah, there is really. But I mean, if you like playing music, it is quite hard, but the thrill is to get out there and play music.
And I suppose even if you never would have made it as an artist, it's something you always would have done, probably.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there was certainly no thought in my mind that I'd ever be a professional musician or that we'd have hit records. I was doing it because I loved playing. I love music and I enjoyed playing with the guys that were in the band. Um, it was only when we won this really big rock and roll competition, I dared to think for the first time. No one said anything. I think they might have been thinking the same thing, the other guys in the band. But I dared to think maybe there's a way ahead for us as professional musicians. That's the first time. And that was only a few weeks before we recorded She's Not There. So I never even dared to dream that we would actually be a professional band. But it happened.
It's interesting with talent competitions. Do you think there wasn't as many back then? It's just, it seems now that there's one every year kind of thing, and it's kind of a bit more diminished kind of thing when you win
It
it.
might be because there are a lot, and particularly as they're on national television. Yeah, it might devalue them a little bit, but then it was a big deal. I thought at the time we were quite sort of brave going in for this competition because there were roughly 100 bands when it was held at Watford Town Hall, and there were 10 bands a week on a Sunday night, and it ran for 10 weeks, so there were 100 bands. And when we won the first heat, I thought that was fantastic. It was more than I ever thought would ever happen. And we got into the final and we won that. I couldn't believe it. Very, very happy night that night in Watford. We won that competition. And as I just said, for the first time, I dared to think there was a way ahead for us as a professional band. No one said anything. But from there, we were introduced to Decca and they gave us the opportunity to record.
And what are some of your favorite concerts and tours that you've been in, that you've done?
Um, well, there are many. I mean, Christmas 1964, we were in the Murray the K Christmas show in the Brooklyn Fox, and we were playing with people like the Shangri-Las and I'm trying to think who was on there now. Patti LaBelle, the Shirelles, like people that we were fans of these acts. Benny King, Chuck Jackson. It was fantastic to be playing in New York in 1964. Later on, we toured in the States again with Del Shannon and lots of the Beach Boys, wonderful artists. All those shows were great. Towards the end of the original Zombies touring career, we went to the Philippines and we thought we would be playing in a bar in a hotel. And we played in this huge Araneta Coliseum, it's called, and we opened to 28,000 people. We had
Wow.
no idea that we had most of the top 10 in records. And we had absolutely no idea because there was no internet then, so there's no way we could know. And we opened to 28,000 people. That was a bit of an eye opener. And then with the Zombies, this present incarnation of the Zombies, that induction ceremony at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2019 was breathtaking, really wonderful. So there's some of the concerts that I remember.
Great. And before you go, could you give me not one of your songs necessarily, but I always ask my guests for a song that they really love to be played on the show.
Okay, well, I'll tell you. my favorite song is by Sting, and it's called Fragile. And I love, I think Sting is a great writer and a great performer, but I particularly love the sentiment of this song. It's a fabulous lyric.
Great. Well, thanks a lot for joining us, Colin. It's been great to have you on.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.